Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. I never thought I'd be fighting for my family's legacy at the age of 32, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name is Sarah Thompson, and I'm the proud owner of Thompson's Orchard, a 50-acre plot of land that's been in my family for over 150 years. Our orchard isn't just a business, it's a living piece of history, a testament to my ancestors' hard work and dedication. The trouble started on a crisp autumn morning in September. I was out in the orchard, inspecting the apples and preparing for the upcoming harvest season. The trees were heavy with ripe fruit, their branches bowing under the weight of juicy Honeycrisps, Galas, and Fujis. The air was filled with the sweet scent of apples and the gentle hum of bees going about their business. As I made my way through the rows of trees, clipboard in hand, I noticed a sleek black SUV pull up to the edge of the property. Two men in suits stepped out, looking comically out of place among the rustic charm of the orchard. I set my clipboard down on a nearby crate and made my way over to greet them, wondering what could have brought such official-looking visitors to our little slice of heaven. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I called out as I approached, brushing my hands off on my jeans. The taller of the two men, a balding guy with a pinched expression, stepped forward. "Are you Sarah Thompson?" he asked, his tone clipped and businesslike. I nodded, suddenly feeling uneasy. "That's me. What's this about?" The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to me with a flick of his wrist. "I'm Gerald Hawkins, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. This is my associate, Robert Carlson, our legal counsel." I glanced down at the card, then back up at the men, confusion written all over my face. "I'm sorry, but I think there must be some mistake. We're not part of any homeowner association. This is private property that's been in my family for generations." Gerald's thin lips curled into what I can only describe as a predatory smile. "That's actually why we're here, Ms. Thompson. It seems there's been a misunderstanding regarding the ownership of this land." My heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me?" Robert, the shorter man with a receding hairline and glasses, cleared his throat. "According to our records, this property falls within the boundaries of the Oak Ridge community. As such, it's subject to homeowner association regulations and oversight." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's impossible. This orchard has been independently owned and operated by my family since before your homeowner association even existed. We've never been part of any community association." Gerald's smile didn't waver. "Be that as it may, we have documentation indicating otherwise. We'll need you to cease all commercial operations immediately and bring the property into compliance with our community standards." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Cease operations? This is our busiest time of year. And what do you mean by community standards? This is a working orchard, not a suburban lawn." Robert pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "We'll need you to remove all signage, restrict public access, and submit plans for landscaping that conform to our approved guidelines. Additionally, you'll need to pay all back dues and fees, which by our calculations come to, let's see." He flipped through some papers. "Approximately $157,000. I nearly choked. $157,000? For an association I've never been part of? This is insane." Gerald's expression hardened. "I assure you, Ms. Thompson, this is all perfectly legal. We're prepared to take this to court if necessary. I suggest you review these documents and consult with a lawyer. You have 30 days to comply, or we'll be forced to take further action." With that, they handed me the folder and turned to leave. I stood there, dumbfounded, watching as they got back into their SUV and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Anger, fear, disbelief. How could this be happening? The orchard had been in my family for generations, passed down from my great-great-grandfather to my grandfather, then to my father, and finally to me. We'd never been part of any homeowner association. Hell, we weren't even part of a neighborhood. The nearest house was over a mile away. I looked down at the folder in my hands, my mind racing. There was no way I was going to let some power-hungry homeowner association take away my family's legacy. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the fight ahead. If they wanted a battle, they were going to get one. That evening, after closing up the orchard store and sending the last of the day's visitors on their way, I sat down at the old oak desk in my grandfather's study. The room was filled with the comforting smell of old books and leather, and the walls were lined with photographs and memorabilia from the orchard's long history. I opened the folder the homeowner association had given me and began to pore over the documents. Most of it was dense legal jargon that made my head spin, but the gist of it was clear. They were claiming that our orchard had somehow been incorporated into their community when it was established in the 1980s. As I flipped through the pages, my eye caught on a map that showed the supposed boundaries of the Oak Ridge community. To my horror, I saw that our orchard was indeed included within the red line that marked the homeowner association's territory. "This can't be right," I muttered to myself, running a hand through my hair in frustration. I pulled out my laptop and started researching, determined to find some answers. Hours ticked by as I dug through online property records, old newspaper articles, and anything else I could find about the history of our land and the surrounding area. Around midnight, bleary-eyed and exhausted, I stumbled upon something that made me sit up straight. It was an article from 1985, announcing the development of the Oak Ridge community. The piece mentioned that the new neighborhood would be built on 200 acres of undeveloped land adjacent to the historic Thompson Orchard. Adjacent to? Not including? A spark of hope flared in my chest. This was proof that our orchard was never meant to be part of their community. But how had we ended up on their map? I knew I needed help to make sense of all this legal mumbo-jumbo. First thing in the morning, I called my cousin Jake, who worked as a paralegal in the city. "Hey Sarah," Jake answered, his voice thick with sleep. "What's up? Everything okay?" "Not really," I replied, launching into an explanation of the situation. Jake listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Wow, that's something else. Listen, I know a great property lawyer. Her name's Melissa Chen, and she specializes in these kinds of disputes. Want me to give her a call?" I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Yes, please. I need all the help I can get." Jake promised to set up a meeting and get back to me. True to his word, he called back that afternoon with an appointment for the next day. The following morning, I found myself sitting across from Melissa Chen in her downtown office. She was a petite woman with a sharp gaze and an air of quiet confidence that immediately put me at ease. "So, Ms. Thompson," Melissa said after I'd explained the situation, "the first thing we need to do is establish a clear chain of ownership for your property. Do you have any old deeds or property documents?" I nodded. "There's a safe in my grandfather's study with all sorts of old papers. I haven't gone through it yet, but I'm sure there's something useful in there." Melissa smiled. "Excellent. Those documents will be crucial. We'll also need to look into the original plans for the Oak Ridge development and see if we can find out how your property ended up on their map." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "I won't lie to you, Sarah. These cases can be complex and time-consuming. Homeowner associations often have deep pockets and aren't afraid to play hardball. But from what you've told me, I think we have a strong case. Your family's long history on that land works in our favor." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of determination and anxiety. What should I do in the meantime? They gave me 30 days to comply with their demands. "Don't comply with anything," Melissa said firmly. "We'll draft a response asserting your rights and challenging their claim. In the meantime, keep operating your orchard as usual. If they try to take any action against you, let me know immediately." I left Melissa's office feeling more optimistic than I had in days. There was a long road ahead, but at least now I had a plan and a capable ally in my corner. Back at the orchard, I threw myself into the research with renewed vigor. I spent hours in my grandfather's study, carefully going through the contents of the old safe. Among the yellowed papers and faded photographs, I found a treasure trove of information. The original deed from 1868 when my great-great-grandfather purchased the land, subsequent property transfers, tax records, and even old maps showing the boundaries of our land. As I pieced together the history of our orchard, a clearer picture began to emerge. Our property had remained unchanged for over a century, its boundaries clearly defined and undisputed. So how had the homeowner association come to believe they had a claim on our land? The answer came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, stopped by the orchard store one afternoon for his usual jug of apple cider. "Heard you're having some trouble with those Oak Ridge folks," he said as I rang up his purchase. I sighed. "News travels fast, huh?" Mr. Jenkins nodded sagely. "Small town. Say, you might want to talk to Bill Harper down at the county records office. He's been there forever and knows all sorts of interesting stories about the land around here." I perked up at this. "Really? Thanks, Mr. Jenkins. I'll do that." The next day, I made my way to the county records office. Bill Harper turned out to be a jovial man in his 70s with the encyclopedic knowledge of local history. "Thompson's Orchard?" he said when I explained why I was there. "Oh, I remember when all this Oak Ridge business started. Caused quite a stir back then." I leaned forward eagerly. "What do you mean?" Bill's eyes twinkled with the excitement of someone about to share a good story. "Well, when the developers first came in with their plans for Oak Ridge, they tried to buy up all the land around your orchard. Your grandfather, tough old bird he was, refused to sell. Caused quite a headache for the developers. He rummaged through some files and pulled out an old map. See here? This was their original plan. They wanted your orchard as the centerpiece of their community. Thought it'd be a big selling point, but your grandfather wouldn't budge." I studied the map, my heart racing. "So how did we end up on their current maps?" Bill shook his head. "That's where things get interesting. There was a new surveyor brought in towards the end of the project. Young fella, bit careless. He misread some of the old property lines and included your orchard in his final drawings. By the time anyone noticed, the plans had already been submitted and approved." I felt a mix of relief and anger. "So it was all a mistake? A clerical error?" "Seems that way," Bill nodded. "Course that was nearly 40 years ago now. Guess nobody ever got around to fixing it." I left the records office with copies of the original plans and the incorrect survey, my mind whirling with this new information. This was the evidence we needed to prove that the homeowner association's claim was based on a decades-old mistake. Over the next few weeks, Melissa and I worked tirelessly to build our case. We gathered affidavits from longtime residents who could attest to the orchard's independence, compiled historical records, and prepared a detailed timeline of events. Meanwhile, the homeowner association wasn't sitting idle. They sent increasingly threatening letters, each one more demanding than the last. They even tried to post notices on our property, which I promptly removed. The situation came to a head one crisp October morning. I was in the orchard store, helping a young family pick out pumpkins for Halloween, when I heard a commotion outside. I stepped out to find Gerald Hawkins and a group of homeowner association board members marching up the driveway, looking like they were on a mission. "Ms. Thompson," Gerald called out, his voice dripping with false politeness, "I see you've chosen to ignore our notices. We're here to inform you that we'll be placing a lien on this property effective immediately." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice calm. "Mr. Hawkins, I've already informed you that we dispute your claim to this property. My lawyer has sent you multiple communications to this effect." Gerald's face reddened. "Your dispute is baseless. This land is part of the Oak Ridge community, and you will comply with our regulations." By this time, a small crowd of customers had gathered, watching the confrontation with interest. I noticed several of them pulling out their phones, no doubt recording the scene. I stood my ground, crossing my arms. "Mr. Hawkins, I'm going to have to ask you and your associates to leave. You're trespassing on private property and disrupting my business." "Trespassing?" Gerald sputtered. "This is homeowner association property." "No, it's not," came a new voice. I turned to see Melissa striding up the driveway, a folder tucked under her arm. "And I have the documents to prove it." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Melissa Chen, Ms. Thompson's attorney," she replied coolly. "I was on my way here to update my client when I saw this little gathering. Gentlemen, I suggest you leave now before we add harassment to the list of charges we're considering." Gerald looked like he was about to explode, but Robert, the homeowner association's lawyer, put a hand on his arm. "Gerald, we should go. We can discuss this through proper channels." With a final glare in my direction, Gerald allowed himself to be led away. As they retreated to their cars, I could hear him muttering about stubborn farmers and legal action. Once they were gone, a smattering of applause broke out among the watching customers. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, suddenly aware of the spectacle we'd created. Melissa turned to me with a grin. "Well, that was exciting, but I actually do have some news for you. Shall we go inside?" As we settled into the office at the back of the store, Melissa spread out a series of documents on the desk. "I think we've got them, Sarah. Look at this." She pointed to a series of maps and surveys. "We've managed to track down the original surveyor who made the mistake back in the 80s. He signed an affidavit admitting to the error and explaining how it happened. Combined with the historical records we've gathered and the testimony from your neighbors, I think we have an airtight case." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "So what happens now?" "Well, I've drafted a formal response to the homeowner association's claims," Melissa explained. "We're not just denying their authority, we're demanding that they correct all their records and maps to accurately reflect the boundaries of their community. We're also asking for a public retraction of their claims and compensation for the stress and potential damage to your business." I let out a long breath. "Do you think they'll fight it?" Melissa shook her head. "They might try, but they don't have a leg to stand on. Once this goes public, they'll be facing a PR nightmare. My guess is they'll try to settle quickly and quietly." She was right. Within days of receiving our response, the homeowner association's lawyer reached out to Melissa to arrange a meeting. It was clear they were rattled by the evidence we'd gathered, and were eager to resolve the situation before it attracted more attention. The meeting took place in a conference room at Melissa's office. Gerald and Robert were there, along with 2 other homeowner association board members. Gone was Gerald's arrogant demeanor. He looked decidedly uncomfortable as Melissa laid out our case. "As you can see," Melissa concluded after walking them through the evidence, "the inclusion of Thompson's Orchard in your community maps was the result of a surveying error made nearly 4 decades ago. This error was never corrected, leading to the current misunderstanding. Ms. Thompson's family has continuously owned and independently operated this property since 1868, well before the establishment of your homeowners association." Robert, the homeowner association's lawyer, looked grave. "This is quite compelling evidence. If what you're saying is true, it appears a serious mistake was made." Gerald shifted in his seat. "But surely after all this time, there must be some, I don't know, statute of limitations or something?" Melissa shook her head. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Hawkins. The fact that this error went unnoticed for so long doesn't change the legal reality of the situation. Thompson's Orchard was never part of your community, and you have no authority over the property." There was a long silence as the homeowner association representatives absorbed this information. Finally, Robert spoke up. "What are you asking for exactly?" Melissa slid a document across the table. We want a full retraction of all claims to the property, correction of all homeowner association maps and documents to accurately reflect the boundaries of the Oak Ridge community, and a public apology for the distress caused to Ms. Thompson and her business. We're also seeking compensation for legal fees and potential damages to the orchard's reputation. Gerald's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is outrageous. We were acting in good faith based on the information we had. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Good faith? You threatened my livelihood, tried to force me to change a historic property, and demanded over $150,000 in back dues for an association I've never been part of. How is any of that good faith? Melissa put a calming hand on my arm. I think what my client is trying to say is that your actions, regardless of their basis, have caused significant distress and potential harm. We believe our requests are reasonable given the circumstances. Robert nodded slowly. I think we need some time to discuss this privately. Can we take a short recess? Melissa agreed, and we left the room to allow the homeowner association representatives to confer. As we waited in the hallway, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. Were we finally nearing the end of this ordeal? After what felt like an eternity but was probably only about 20 minutes, we were called back into the conference room. The atmosphere had changed. Gerald looked defeated, while Robert seemed resigned. We've discussed your proposal, Robert began, and while we maintain that we were acting on what we believe to be accurate information, we recognize that a serious error was made. We're prepared to meet most of your demands. Over the next hour, we hammered out the details of an agreement. The homeowner association would issue a public statement acknowledging the error and apologizing for any distress caused. They would correct all their maps and documents to exclude the orchard from their territory. They also agreed to pay my legal fees and a settlement for the trouble they'd caused. The only point of contention was the amount of the settlement. After some back-and-forth negotiation, we settled on a figure that, while less than what we'd initially asked for, was still substantial enough to cover any potential losses and then some. As we wrapped up the meeting, Gerald, looking thoroughly chastened, approached me. Ms. Thompson, I owe you a personal apology. I was overzealous in my duties and didn't consider the possibility that our records could be wrong. I'm truly sorry for the stress this has caused you. I was taken aback by his sincerity. While I wasn't ready to forgive and forget entirely, I appreciated the gesture. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I hope this experience will encourage your homeowner association to be more careful and considerate in the future. He nodded solemnly. You can be assured it will. As Melissa and I left the office, a wave of relief washed over me. It was over. The orchard was safe. In the days that followed, the homeowner association made good on their promises. They issued a public statement explaining the error and apologizing for their actions. Local news outlets picked up the story, and I found myself giving interviews about the orchard's history and the importance of preserving family-owned businesses. The publicity had an unexpected but welcome side effect. Business boomed. People came from all over the county to show their support, buying apples, cider, and pies in record numbers. Many shared stories of their own run-ins with overzealous homeowner associations, expressing admiration for how we'd stood our ground. As the autumn days grew shorter and the last of the apples were harvested, I took a walk through the orchard. The trees were bare now, their gnarly branches reaching toward the gray sky. But I knew that come spring, they would burst into bloom once again, just as they had for over 150 years. I thought about my ancestors who had worked this land, who had planted these trees and nurtured them through countless seasons. I thought about my father, who had taught me everything I knew about running the orchard, and my grandfather, whose stubborn refusal to sell had preserved this legacy for our family. Standing there, surrounded by the quiet strength of those old trees, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and responsibility. The orchard had weathered many storms over the years, economic downturns, harsh winters, and now, an aggressive homeowner association. But it was still here, still thriving. As I turned to head back to the house, I made a silent promise to those who had come before me, and to those who would come after. I would continue to care for this land, to preserve its history and independence. Thompson's Orchard would remain a place where families could come to pick apples, drink cider, and make memories for generations to come. The battle with the homeowner association had been stressful and at times frightening, but in the end, it had only strengthened my resolve. This land was more than just property. It was a living link to the past and a promise to the future. And as long as I had anything to say about it, it would stay that way, free from the constraints of any homeowners association, true to its roots, and open to all who wanted to experience a little piece of history. As I reached the edge of the orchard, I paused to look back one last time. The setting sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the rows of trees. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be, carrying on a tradition that was bigger than any one person or generation. With a smile, I turned and walked towards home, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that, like the sturdy apple trees behind me, Thompson's Orchard would stand strong for years to come. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.